Leaders, real life leaders.
Hey guys, welcome to today's episode. And today we have Andy Craig, and he's written a book called Passion Power, Discover the 3 Indispensable Keys to Your Success. And today we're focusing on disgruntled and unmotivated employees. So many of us have had people who've been with us for a long time. Maybe they're not doing a good job anymore. They used to when you were smaller, or maybe they're just disgruntled and just kind of have a bad attitude. Then this episode is for you. So Andy, welcome.
Well, thank you very much, Chantel. It's a pleasure to be here.
So let's talk about that. Let's say that you have people that have been with you for a long time. The biggest thing is you don't want to start all the way new because they know so much because they've been with you for so long. But sometimes they may take advantage because they've been with you for a long time. So talk about that.
Employees that have, when you've got team members that have been with you for a long time, yes, you've invested a lot into them. There's no question about that. Really, it comes down to how, for me, I'll say this is my advice when I talk with people. How well do you know your employee? How well do you know what their deep-rooted wants, needs, and desires are? They're there because they need a job. They're there because it's just what they know. But really, how well do you know them? And when you actually understand where they're coming from, how aligned with your vision, how aligned are they with the purpose of what your work is or what your business is all about there, and we figure out who they are, figure out what they're all about, because each of us has wants, needs, and desires. Problem is, we don't really know how to make those happen. And the purpose of your business is to really fund your dreams and your goals. The purpose of your job, of your employee's job, is to help make the business work. But are they there to support you? If they're disgruntled, if they are unhappy, chances are there's something going on that they're not willing to talk about. So how well do you know them? How well do you know what's going on in their personal lives? How many times do we figure out that we've got personal issues that are affecting our workplace performance? So get to know your people. Figure out who they are. What do they like to do for fun? Who are they off the job? Who are they when they're out and about? You might even want to quote Facebook stalk them. Figure out what's going on in their life, because so many times you may have heard the phrase, hurt people hurt other people. And if you've got negative employees, chances are they've got some situations that are going on that are affecting them on the job. So that'd be my first piece of advice, is to figure out who your employees are, really what they're all about, and where it is that they want to go, so that you can best figure out what's going on with them. Is that making sense?
Yeah. And it's funny because I just did a podcast. I am writing a new book called How to Delegate Everything But Sex. And on the podcast, we opened it up for questions. And one of the guys said, I hired one of my really good friends, and he's been with us for a really long time. And now, he's got decreased productivity. He's not getting near as much done. I feel like he's doing the bare minimum that meets the expectations, and sometimes doesn't even, doesn't go above and beyond, and just has kind of an in general bad attitude. And it feels like it's kind of, disrupting team harmony, just because anytime you ask him to do something, it's kind of like, well, I've got so much other stuff to do. But really, he doesn't feel like he has a lot of stuff for him to do. So he kind of just expressed it. And he's like, but at this point, I hired him when he was, my best friend. And now it just kind of makes it awkward because, he's like, I'm paying him a lot of money and he's not performing. So I gave him a response, but I'd love to hear what you would say is the response is for that.
That's a difficult situation there. If when you hire on a friend, that can go one of two ways: really good, really bad. In this case, it's not going very well. And I would just have a heart-to-heart conversation. I'm all about open and honest communication. And when we can get real with people, and the open and honest communication has got to start with the individual that's initiating the conversation. And I would simply say, hey, here's the performance. You're my friend. and I really like you. I respect you. Otherwise, I wouldn't have brought you on board. You're my friend. But right now, we're in a tough situation. Here's the results. I brought you on board for this specific reason, and you're not really performing at what we agreed to here. Let's talk about this. Let's figure out what's going on for you, and just have that heart-to-heart conversation, that open and honest communication there. And me, if I was having that conversation, I would have to be open and honest first. Say, hey, here's where I'm at. Here's what's going on. Here are my expectations. I've got a lot going on as well. That way, I'm initiating the honesty, the transparency, because when we send out that transparency, when we send out that open and honest communication, we then create that space for that to come back to us. That's how I would address that one there. Does that answer the question?
Yeah. And I said pretty much a lot of the same things, but I also said, like, making sure that that position has simple metrics to measure what the KPIs or the key performance indicators are, because that way you can separate your friendship for what the KPIs are or the key performance indicators. And so you could literally say to someone, every person's job needs to have, first of all, you need to have leading KPIs, not just lagging KPIs, because lagging KPIs measure kind of the current state of business and its achievements towards a goal after a period of time. And leading KPIs measure and determine a business future state.
Mm-hmm.
So first of all, kind of measuring, okay, what is the lagging KPIs, but also what are the leading KPIs, and saying to someone, okay, let's discuss, this is what winning looks like in this position. And then you can say to them, okay, it's clear, it's detailed, it's simple. Here's what I want you to do. Like, I want you to improve customer satisfaction ratings by 10% by the end of Q3, or here's whatever the list is that person needs to do. I think what the problem is probably because he hired this person as a friend. I'm wondering, and as a higher level, I wonder if he even set KPIs in advance. And now it's kind of like, there's no way to determine, is this person hitting the goals or are they not? Like, for example,
Yeah,
in our inside sales department, they have to set a certain number of appointments and they have to do a certain number of hires. We already know, it's like so easy, right? But as you move up the ladder into like management and higher roles, creating those KPIs on what someone needs to do honestly gets harder and harder. And so a lot of, as people rise, they may not have those KPIs in place. And so my advice was, have a conversation that goes right back to, here's what winning looks like. This is what we want to see you do. This is not about our friendship, but our business needs A, B, and C. Would you agree with that?
Wholeheartedly. I know when I was in that environment, that's exactly what I was measured on, is KPIs. And if you didn't hit the stats or within this certain area of that one, you had a talk. And that's exactly what I would recommend. As a manager, as a leader, as a owner, whatever the position is, I would very much recommend having that KPI conversation, because that's really the metric of success in that kind of environment. And if you don't have those clearly defined KPIs in place, then you don't have the common basis of discussion there. So I would wholeheartedly agree with all of that.
So what about positions that are, more administrative and so forth? I think people have a hard time even writing some of those KPIs. Do you have any kind of tips to kind of get people to figure out exactly what each position, how to write those KPIs for the different positions?
My primary experience comes from being in a call center when it comes to the KPI side of things. So what's in my mind is service related when being on the phone. I've also got sales background, which you've got the areas of your outbound calls, how many interviews are you making, things of that nature that go into the sales conversation. When it comes to the administrative side, I don't have a whole lot of experience with that, but what I would think of it is within that role, if I was to design that role, I would probably be going along the line of how many calls are you taking from individuals, or maybe outbound phone calls if it's an administration role there, depending on the nature of that role. Is there an organization setup that needs to be done? It all depends on the nature of that role on the admin side. How many are you typing up papers? If so, how many papers are you typing up? How many emails are going out is all going to depend on the nature of that role and what do you consider to be success at the end of a day or at the end of the week or at the end of a month based upon the nature of that particular role. What is it that they're doing? It all depends on as the secretarial administrator or whatever that role happens to be. It all depends on what is that role, what metrics can be achieved or created out of the basis of what it is that you want done in that role. Is that making sense?
Yeah. So you, in your book, you wrote the book Passion Power, the 3 indispensable keys to your success. Tell us what those 3 keys are and give us a quick story to get people to understand what those 3 are.
Oh, absolutely. The 3 keys that I talk about are first and foremost, your purpose, your past, and your provision. Your purpose is all about who you are wired to be. And I very quickly figured this out. I'll give you the very short version here because I know we don't have a lot of time for talk in this particular area here. The purpose is all about who you're created to be. And I discovered this when I was working in a call center. And I figured out that I got burned out and I needed a shift because I wasn't working within my strengths. Each of us has a purpose. Each of us has skills, talents, strengths, etc. And I needed to figure out what that looked like. And after some soul searching, I very quickly figured out that I wasn't asking myself the right questions. And the epiphany that I had was, Andy, if you're not satisfied with the quality of the results you have in your life, you need to re-examine the quality of the questions that you're asking yourself. And that's what I did. I re-examined the quality of the questions. I figured out that I wanted to go into speaking, because that's where my strength zone is. And that's what it is that I want to be doing is speaking and training. And so I had to figure out what that looked like to move forward. That I discovered that is my purpose. I'd known that for a while, but I didn't know exactly how to put that into action. And that led me into contract training. So that's a short version of what your purpose is all about, figuring out what your talents and your skills are so you can put that into action. And every employee needs to figure out, every employer needs to figure out what their employees' skills, talents, and abilities are. So that's the purpose there, very short version of that one. Next one would be your past. Each of us has a past. I have a past, you have a past, and we all have failures in our history. My experience tells me that not only from my experience, but from people that I've witnessed, that we commonly discount what we can do because we have had failures in our life, as opposed to using those failures as a springboard of experience of, hey, I learned a whole heck of a lot from this experience, and I'm going to be able to go ahead and catapult this into the future because I have learned from my past failures. As we were talking briefly beforehand, Chantel, I shared with you how I went into that contract training role in a subject that I did not know. I took the position thinking I could learn this subject matter, and I learned it, but it was a very painful process in learning it because I'm not detail oriented. At least that's not my natural strength. And I was in a detail oriented situation. And I needed to learn this. I went to train the first seminar that I put on, very quickly figured out that I did not know what I thought I knew. I knew it, the audience knew it, and I knew that the audience knew that I didn't know it. Very bad situation all the way around. So I had to figure out how to learn my subject matter. It took me 3 months to learn it and 6 months before I could train it effectively. And I did that role for about 2 years. And then COVID shut everything else down from there. But I learned from that experience, if I can, with my natural bent, learn something that's very technical, even though that's not what I want to do, what am I able to take that into? So you got to learn from your past failures in terms of what to do and how to move forward in life. And then provision. We all have provision all around us. Now, for the longest period of time, and there's a lot of people that will probably relate to this, I thought that provision was strictly monetary. And I figured out multiple years ago that it's not monetary. We all have we have relationship currency, we have time currency, we have our network currency, we have all these variations of provision that are showing up to us through each day. And the story that I like to share is how my wife and I got together back when we were engaged over 10 years ago. I was living in Seattle, Washington. She was living in Alabama. And at this particular time, I was broke, busted, and disgusted and needed to figure out how to get down there. I had a coach who helped me out. He basically laid out a challenge for me saying, go ahead and do it. Just take a step and move. So I said, okay, I'll do it. I didn't know anyone in Alabama. And within a 2-week period of time, I had found a job. And within a 4-week period of time, I had actually taken the step to go down to Alabama, not knowing anyone. And I drove from Seattle, Washington down to Alabama over the course of actually 5 days. I was holding up 4. It's actually 5 days. And that is finding the provision I had in me because I had time and I had the ability to move forward in what I did have. I figured out the way of bringing in the resources that I need to create that end result that I wanted to create. So I encourage everyone, don't look at one area for provision. You may know people that open the door. I know a gentleman who talks about the power of who. He says that we all know all the people that we need to know. It's sometimes our network is the provision. We just need to have a door open. So that's what I like to talk about in there is those 3 areas: your purpose, your passion, and your provision. And that's in my book, Passion Power.
I love it. Well, tell listeners where they can find your book and where they can follow you.
Absolutely. You can find my book. I'm actually giving away a book free of charge. You can purchase it, or correction, you can get it just by paying shipping and handling. Go to PP Book. That's PP, short for Passion Power Book, .andycraigspeaks.com. And you can also find out if you want to schedule a conversation with me, learn a little bit more, you can go to my webpage, andycraigspeaks.com. So get the book at ppbook.andycraigspeaks.com, and you can catch up with me at andycraigspeaks.com.
Awesome. Well, you guys stay tuned. We've got another episode coming up in just a few.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Real Life Leadership. If you'd like to get the show notes or access more resources, log on to reallifeleaders.com/podcast to get the show notes from this episode and any other resources we might have mentioned. And also, we'd love to hear from you. Be sure to review or rate this podcast on Apple Podcasts to help spread the word. And if you have any leadership questions you want answered, email podcast@reallifeleaders.com.